My name is Krishna Kumar. You can call me Krish. I have 20 years of experience in IT industry. So I am personally a PMP certified. I took the certification way back in 2009 and still hold that credentials with the good PDUs, professional development units, which I can talk to you about. And then I'm also a PMI ACP certified professional. About this training, if you look at it, this is the structure that we are going to have. By the way, I will be sharing all these, whatever I'm sharing you on the screen, I'll send you an email to you, okay, after the end of this session, today's session.
Okay.
So that you can have reference material on this. Okay, so we have a total of 14 lessons. So this is being the first lesson. And the remaining, if you see the lesson 2, project management framework, lesson 3, project management processes, and you have first knowledge area, second, we have 10 knowledge areas. Are you any familiar with the PMP structure, by the way?
So yeah, like I said, I've been going through the training videos and everything, and through the study guides. So I gotten through the time management study guide, and I'm moving on to the project cost management study notes. But I'll leave this up to you as well as
all right. So we will probably start from scratch. I mean, though you have gone through some material already, we will start from scratch as per the schedule that we have given here. And then maybe this will be a refreshment for you, for example, the time on cost management that you have already seen could be a refreshment for you. And maybe I will also tell you my experience in the past 20 years, whatever I had, real life experience, whenever it comes related to whatever the knowledge area that we are looking at. I hope if you, as soon as the training is over, probably you can apply for the exam and clear the exam very soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So this is what we are going to look at in this particular lesson. So we're going to look at PMBOK overview. What are the key terms that we are using in PMBOK? That's very, very critical. And then we are talking about organization structures, how organization influences the project management, how organization influence the project manager. What are the key things that the project manager has to look at from the organization perspective? And then we will talk about the project lifecycle, the methodology and process groups, and lifecycle characteristics. We will also talk about product lifecycle. So there are two things: difference between a project and a product. We'll be looking at it, and then the difference between the lifecycle of a product and project also. So this entirely will give you a high-level picture on what is the project management framework is all about, what the PMI has described. Okay. So today we will cover this one, project management framework. Then we have something called project management processes that we spoke about, that initiation planning, right? Initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and processing. So those 5 process group. And then we will talk about scope management, scope knowledge area. So, I think whatever the time it is, we will stop there because too much of information on a single day will be, too much to digest for you. Yeah. So we will go slow. At the same time, we will just ensure that, we cover as much as possible. So these are that's the agenda that I have today. In case if you feel you want to cover more or, you want to cover less, let me know. Feel free, because since you and me only, we can work out anything that's, convenient for both of us.
Oh, no, looks good. Let's get started.
Yeah. Okay. So we will start PMBOK. So this is the key thing from Project Management Institute has given this, they have developed a guide basically on project management completely. So PMBOK is a body of knowledge. So based on all the experiences, by the senior people in the PMI, they got together and they created a volume of this book called PMBOK, and which they have really beautifully, they have structured this book in terms of these processes, process group, and knowledge areas, and the edition that we are talking about is the PMBOK 5th edition. So if you are going to take the exam after this course is over, then will be taking exam on PMBOK 5th edition, but now PMI is coming up with 6th edition with a few changes in the knowledge areas and other things. So every edition they come up with new processes, they remove existing process, they fine tune the new process, they come up with a new process, So, right. So right now, the 5th edition, if you take the exam right now, it will be 5th edition. If you take the exam in October or November, it may be 6th edition with different things. So I would suggest as soon as possible, you should write the exam, because even though you may have 1 year time frame to write the exam, even if you apply now, but by the time you write the exam, let's say, for example, if you're going to take the exam early next year, then you may have to write the exam with PMBOK 6th edition. Then again, you may have to attend the classes by paying the amount. So not every year, there is no structured way of, PMI coming up with a change in editions. But, whenever they accumulate a lot of feedback and they come up with best practices, then obviously they try to, change the, they come up with new structure and a new edition every time. Maybe once in 2 years or once in 3 years. It depends upon the time frame and the content that they receive. So this is generally recognized as a good practice. Basically, PMBOK is, if you read that and if you are able to apply that, that's the best practice that you can ever do in your project management area. And it talks about a lot of project management jargons. It talks about vocabulary. So project management body of knowledge is not a methodology. We are not saying that this is the methodology that you'll have to follow. It is a framework. It's a framework that is given to us. So we can expand that framework and see how to make use of that. So, how to make use of that in our day-to-day activities. So that's what we need to learn. Okay, coming to some key terms in the project management framework. The first thing is a project, right? So what is that, a project? This is the definition from the PMI. Okay, a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or research. That's a project management PMI's definition. So what is the key word that you see here from the project perspective?
Temporary.
Exactly. Temporary and unique. Temporary is one thing, unique is other thing. Okay, so because every project is unique and every project is temporary. The reason why we say temporary is because it has a definitive start and end date. Okay, a temporary could be even to 1 week project, or it could be a 1 year project, or it could be a 10-year project. It doesn't matter upon the duration. But if you're, for example, if you're constructing a subway, trains, right? Subway. So it's going to take minimum 3 or 4 years for you to complete the subway, construction, right? So that's also a project. So you can take up a sample application project, simple application that you're developing, which could be even 1 month. But the reason we say temporary is because once you start and once it ends, the project is over. That's it. So that's the reason we call it temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product. So you can probably create 2 different applications. Same application twice, but every single application is unique. There could be a little bit of change, change from the scope, time, or cost, or any of these constraints, basically. So that's the reason every single project is unique. Okay, now let's say a project is, you are doing a project and the project has gone live. It's right now, going live, and you're doing some day-to-day maintenance on that. So would you consider this as a project?
Now, would that be operations, right?
That will be operations. Basically, that's a BAU activities. So any BAU activities, right? Business as usual. Mm-hmm. So obviously cannot be taken as a project, because operations is a BAU. It's a day-to-day, people are going to do the same kind of, work. So it's not unique, basically. Yep. So, right. So that's another thing. Maybe, some of the questions may be like that. The questions could be saying that, the project is an operational project. This is an operations project. So do you consider this as a you know, a temporary or, unique or, service or result, whatever. So you may have to select the right answer accordingly. So we need to understand the difference between the project and, operations, basically. Then project work is not same as operational work. Operations is ongoing and repetitive work, because since it's going to be repetitive, project is not something repetitive. Project has its own way of, and we have our own way of handling things. So project is that. And okay, so project is again includes but is not limited to what are the other characteristics of a project. So it creates a unique product, service, or result. We saw that. Creates a lasting outcome that may be tangible or intangible. So not all projects are tangible. At the same time, not all projects are intangible, right? So that will be an outcome of a project, right? So if we do a project, that's going to be some outcome. Is there any project that you think that won't have an outcome at all? The outcome could be tangible or intangible. That's a different thing. But without outcome, there cannot be any project, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and surely it has a definitive beginning and end. Start and end has to be discussed, and it creates unique deliverables. So these are some of the characteristics of the project. And okay, when does a project end, basically? A project end when it meets its objective, or when the project sponsor or the client terminates the project. So it's not mandatory that all the project should start and end only with an outcome. That's a possible that a project may come to a halt without an outcome. So that's the reason I asked you the earlier question. Mm-hmm. Is there any project that can be, without an outcome? It is possible, but when you terminate a project, there is I can tell you one example where, I was working in Citibank, as I said earlier, in New York. I was working, we were almost 150 member team. And we were working for almost 1.5 years on the project. Due to organization change, right? There was a change in the senior management. The CEO of the company changed. And you won't believe, overnight, he completely canceled the project. He said, we are not going to do this project. And he came up with another idea. So the effort and, the cost and effort and human resources effort, everything that's been there for 1.5 years gone completely waste overnight. There was no outcome at all.
Wow, so, I've never had that happen before.
Yeah, he terminated the project, and we were shocked. Like anything, everybody was shocked, and in fact, a lot of people had insecurity as well, right? I mean, overnight, no project is not there. Then what are they going to do? Especially the consultants. A lot of people did not have the job. I mean, not all 150 were really, replaced in the new project. So a lot of people lost their jobs as well because of that. I mean, I believe, at least, I don't know the exact amount, but I believe they would have lost more than few millions, basically, millions of dollars, because it was 1.5 years just to calculate the cost of the resources for 1.5 years, and that to 150 resources.
Yeah.
Not one or two resources. So that's what I was thinking. Maybe it's a bank, and it's a very big bank. They can afford to do that. We cannot afford, really. Anyway, so I have seen the project being terminated as well in my experience. So it was something not theoretical for me, actually. So, right. So that's one of that's one of the reasons how a project can end. The project, when it meets its deliverables, when it meets its objective, it can end, or when it is being terminated, either by the client or the sponsor, or due to any organizational changes, whatever influences, basically. So we have something called the professional standards. Professional standards is making sure that you understand the the differences in culture, language, education. So now that we are, earlier days when we were executing project, we used to execute, when the technology was not there, we used to execute only within the same region or the same building or something. Nowadays, everybody is working. I'm seeing a lot of people working completely from home, 100%. Have you heard about crossover, by the way?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. When you get a chance, probably you should look at that website, crossover.com. Okay, and you will find lots of jobs there, lots of n number of jobs. And you know the way it works, everybody works from home, 100%. There is no office, and they are throughout the globe. Okay, so there will be one project manager, let's say in Australia, there will be an architect in US, there will be a quality guy in India, and nobody would have seen each other. No one has seen each other, and only way of interacting, they have an excellent systems in place, in the sense they have an excellent applications and everything in place where they can chat and they can probably come on video or something, and it's a monitored what is that way of, you should have a webcam in your desktop or a laptop, so they monitor you basically. They monitor your work and for 8 hours. And I see a lot of projects getting executed. No office space, nothing. Everybody has to set up a home office. That's it. It's all their cost. So a lot of companies, organizations, they really go through this crossover kind of thing. I mean, crossover is one example website. There are many more websites which are there, which, so the reason I'm trying to state this is, some standards, differences in culture, language, education, experience, and resources, right? I mean, nowadays we can see that a lot of people working across the globe on a same project. So obviously, you try to learn about people, you try to learn about the culture. Maybe if you don't know the language, at least you know. So this is what the project is structured about. So standards promote understanding these things. And what is the difference between standards and regulations? Regulations are requirements that are imposed by a government body. For example, if the US federal government states that, you need to, for a healthcare, this is the way you have to file the claim. That's a regulation. You cannot file a claim, any other way. So that's the only way you have to file a claim. So, but standards are something that is different versus regulation, which is a mandatory one, which is a forced one. Standard is not forced upon you, but standards give you a understanding of multiple things, like what we see, the culture, language, education, experience, and resources, other things.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So then coming to project management, it is executed by applying and integrating project management processes. So we have these process groups, initiating, planning. So in your project, will you be able to relate to whether you have been involved in all these 5 process groups?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have been involved right from initiating.
Yeah, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring. Yeah, I've been in all these.
Great. I mean, not a lot of people actually. I've seen a lot of participants telling that, I have been I've been involved only in planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, whereas they're not into initiating and closing. Even during my earlier project management days, I was also like initiating. What happens is some of the organizations, they initiate with somebody else. I mean, some senior guys. And then once they initiate the project, they hand it over to the other project manager. So sometimes it happens. So it's good that you have been involved in all the 5. That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So managing a project. So what are the key things that we need to really manage the project? I mean, what are the key things that needs from the project manager point of view? So one, let's say, for example, first thing, you need to know the scope. For you to get in the scope, you need to know the requirements. So you need to manage the requirements. Basically, that's a key area for a project manager. And then the other thing is stakeholders, right? So all the stakeholders, who are all the interested in the project. So you need to make sure that you need to manage them. The stakeholders are very, very important in terms of so the planning and executing the stages. I mean, it's throughout the life cycle, basically. Stakeholders communication is going to be important. And you know that probably you must be aware how much percentage of time does a project manager spend this time? What is in communication?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are you aware of that?
Yeah, communication, transparency. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, how much percentage of time does he spend in a project?
How much?
How much? Yeah.
A lot. Probably, it would probably be like, I'd say like 50% of the time, 50 to 60% of the time. I don't know.
Okay. I'll tell you, it's 90%.
I mean, they got to do some work too, right?
Yeah, but communication is the key thing from a project manager perspective. See, any project manager, communication is not only typing email, right? It's in terms of providing the status reports, in terms of conducting meetings. See, if you look at it, project manager is not going to undertake any activities in a project, right? He's going to delegate the activities. He's going to direct the activities. And of course, he's going to manage things. That's it. He's a manager. He has to manage people. He has to manage the team. He has to manage the senior management. He has to manage the stakeholders. He has to manage the client. He has to manage the quality team. So everything, if you see, he's just going to manage. While managing, most of the time he's going to do is what? Communicating. So that's the reason PMI states that, the project manager's time in communicating is 90%. Only 10% he does any other things that's possible that he has to do. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, and the other key thing that he has to do is, he has to manage the project constraints. So have you heard about the triple constraints?
Yeah.
So the triple constraints are scope, time, and cost, right? But now we'll be seeing a lot of other constraints also. Like initially, it was when we were talking about only triple constraints. Now we are generally talking about project constraints. See, balancing project constraints could be of any form. It could be either scope, time, cost. It could be quality. It could be risk. It could be stakeholder. It could be communication. So any of these knowledge areas that we are talking about. So the project manager has to ensure that, a lot of arrows are coming to hit him from different directions. So he has to manage, every arrow, single arrow from multiple directions. So he has to make sure that, all these constraints are really removed. All the challenges and constraints are really taken into action, and then see how they can be overcome. Okay, they can be overcome. So that's the key things that the project manager has to do. It's not limited to whatever we have discussed, but these are the key areas that the project manager has to do. So project management methodology. So we said that PMBOK is not a methodology, but it's a framework, right? It's a kind of it's kind of a tool that helps us to do. But what is a methodology means? Methodology is going to talk about its collection of policies, procedures, guidelines, templates, and mandatory items. So methodology, when we talk about, let's say, for example, we are talking about methodology. What comes to your mind when we talk about methodology from a project management point of view?
I think it's kind of what you have up on the board here, right? It's, having, status templates, communication templates. So if I'm going to give status updates on projects, like I'm going to have a certain criteria that I'm going to follow, identifying, what was completed for the week, what's upcoming, what are some risks, what are some mitigation strategies for those. And I think following that type of methodology,
okay. Any specific methodology that you are aware of? What is the methodology that you follow in your projects?
I don't know. I guess I'm not quite sure what you mean by methodology.
Okay. Have you heard about waterfall methodology?
Oh yeah. That's like, it sounds like more like a BT perspective. Like obviously there's waterfall, so like the system development life cycle. So obviously I'm going to gather, do the requirements phase, then I'm going to do the implementation, then testing, and then delivery, and follow up, and
Okay, so that is what we call as methodology. For example, the waterfall, right? If you look at the collection of policies, procedures, guidelines, templates, and mandatory items, if you look at from waterfall perspective, if you relate to waterfall, then you will know. See, waterfall, what are the guidelines, what are the templates? You will have a lot of templates for waterfall methodology. A lot of documentation templates. So you know that waterfall means, if you're taking a project, which methodology you want to follow, you need to understand that, because nowadays we have agile methodologies. agile methodology that is coming in, agile framework, whatever methodology or framework. Sometimes it is used synonymously from agile point of view. From waterfall, always we talk about methodology. So what happens is, the waterfall, you have a methodology in the sense you have a process in place, you have a procedure in place. This is how you have to execute the project. And this is when exactly the requirements is going to come in. Then you have to do the design, then you have to do the development, and then you have to test it, then implement it, and then go live, right? So these are some of the steps. And in waterfall, basically, you talk about what are the key things that are required. For example, the requirements. If you talk about the milestones, right? The requirement sign off would be the key things, because from waterfall perspective, requirements is the key area, because we will not be involving the customer very frequently in waterfall methodology. We will get the requirements, and then finally, after the end product is done, final deliverable, we try to involve the customer. Until then, maybe we will not even involve the customer. So there are certain, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say ours is a little bit different the way we do things, just from a consulting perspective. So we engage very heavily with the customer in the beginning of it. Obviously during the initiation phase, and then going through the discovery phase, fleshing out the requirements. Say if we're designing reporting and analytics and dashboards, obviously we involve them in the design phase as well. And obviously we have to get sign off from a requirement standpoint. We have to get sign off from a design standpoint. And then obviously then we go into the build and SIT and UAT, and then we'll bring the customer back for the obviously user acceptance testing, and then eventually sign off and go live. But I think like it's very heavy customer in the beginning for maybe about 6 to 8 weeks, and then obviously we'll do the build and system integration testing for maybe about 8 weeks, and then bring the UAT back for say like 2 or 3 weeks, and then obviously then sign off. So
how big is the project? What is the project size in the sense? What is the duration of the project?
Yeah, it depends. It depends what we're doing. So obviously if we're doing like dashboarding and analytics, it could be anywhere from maybe 8 to 12 weeks. We try to do it depending on what, I guess, system and infrastructure they have in place. I've been on projects that have gone maybe like 16 to 20 weeks, because we have to kind of build some things from scratch and get a good foundation in. But obviously then we do projects like building, data warehousing and, doing a lot of combining of old legacy systems into one system, and those projects last for years, not years, but maybe about a year or two, depending on what all the information that's needed, all the requirements. Obviously there's a lot to go through in terms of setting everything up, in terms of who's going to be using what, and in terms of data marts and stuff. So it's those projects are very heavily customer focused, because we need inputs and subject matter experts that handle the data and handle the reporting and how they want things set up. So it's I think it varies in terms of what type of projects you're on.
Okay. That's really good to see. But maybe if I try to understand more, maybe I can relate to whether you are really doing a waterfall, or maybe indirectly you are following an agile methodology here.
It's more waterfall. There's been like, if we do little projects here and there, it's more agile, but I mean, for the most part, we still follow the waterfall methodology. So it's gathering the requirements, doing the design, then implementation, then testing, and then sign off. It's following that.
It follows a sequence. So the life cycle sequence is same as waterfall. The only difference you're saying is you engage the customer very frequently during the cycle.
Yeah, in the requirements and design phase, we're very much closely working with the clients on in terms of like, what the requirements are going to be, what data they need to see, what the report's going to look like, what if we're designing dashboards for them, getting their inputs in, what are their must-haves, what are their like-to-haves, all that sort of thing, and leading those discussions and flushing. That's kind of like the discovery phase we go through with them is, what's your day-to-day activities like? How do you interact with the data? What are, what are your key insights? What are insights that you don't have that you would maybe like to see? That sort of thing.
Oh, okay. That's great to hear. Okay. Okay, so the project management methodology also talks about, how the project should be planned, how it should be monitored, and how it should be controlled within the organization. So we'll see some examples later. So now project management system. So what is a system? PMIS, we call it sometimes as project management information system. That's a tool that we use, and that's a tool where through the tools and techniques you try to manage the project. So is there any specific tool that you use for project management in your organization?
Really, the only thing I've used is Microsoft Project Plan. That's pretty much like the standard in our industry. I've never used like an actual project management information system.
Okay. So most of the organizations, even the organization that I used to work had a PMIS, which is very good actually. I mean, if you have a project management information system, it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of managing the projects. It gives you a lot of metrics basically. I mean, of course, your project plan, the NPP also gives you metrics, but this information system gives you a lot of other metrics, quality metrics, and other things which you may not be able to extract from the project plan. Basically, the project plan maybe gives you SPI and CPI, right? Your MPP, Microsoft project, but we'll be getting a lot of other information. So, project management system is something that a lot of organizations follow in for. Including a lot of processes, basically, a lot of processes and functions are built into it so that, the project managers really follow that, and it becomes kind of a standard for them to use it and derive a lot of metrics and provide reports to the senior management. And talking about program management. So, what is a program, right? So how do you relate a program? When do you call something as a program? When do you call something as a project?
So a program has like, I think, sub projects that are related to one another that are going on. So if I'm like a program manager, I'm managing a bunch of projects that are related to one another that'll help obviously drive, business benefits from a program standpoint.
Perfect.
Opposed to a project's just a simple, obviously it's its own entity, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So program is it is a related set of projects. I mean, all programs will have at least one project. Projects, and a project may not be part of a program, but a program will always have projects in it. And all these projects are related to each other. Either one is related, and there could be even dependent on each other. Dependent is in the sense they are integrated. For example, one project's input can be an output can be an input on another project. So though it could be a project as a separate entity, but when you talk about solution, right, you are a consultant, right? When you talk about solutions. So when you talk about solutions, there could be multiple projects that can be involved, and where multiple projects can be interrelated to each other. So for example, I can give you one example of a program or a solution. In my earlier organization, I used to work in my last organization was a BPO industry. I was a program manager on a BPO industry, and it was an IT technology division. And we had multiple projects. So, for example, what we had to do is, let's say, for example, claim, US healthcare claim comes up, right? So, have you heard about CMS?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So CMS is one of the US healthcare mandated claim. Actually, in case if you could go to a doctor, and then if you have to claim your insurance, and that's the way you have to you submit a CMS claim. Yep. Right. So that what happens is so currently a lot of CMS claims comes across the lot of people, right, in US. So per day there will be at least 20,000 or 30,000 claims that comes up, 30K claims that comes up. So and most of the organization for Have you, I mean, I'm not sure you must have heard about WellPoint and what is the other bigger organization, whether US healthcare companies. WellPoint was one that again.
Like
Sorry?
Blue Cross Blue
Blue Cross,
Shield.
yeah, BCBS. Blue Cross Blue Shield, yeah. So BCBS was one of my clients, and WellPoint was one of my clients earlier as a program manager. So what they expected from us is, the claim comes up, and they took at least 7 to 10 business days for them to go through the claim, because the claim was written. It is a manual thing, and they have to go and verify. They have to apply the business rules and see whether they have to pay or deny the claim. So they started off doing it manually, and it was taking a lot of time. So per day 30K claims come from WellPoint. And I mean, multiple, it's not only CMS claims but multiple claims. It could be a dental claim or anything else, anything. So what they asked us to do is to automate the process. So what we did is, we try to take the claim, and that our company's postal unit, they try to go and put some centers, postal centers, so where people can go and just put their claims in the postal box, and then there will be a vehicle which will go and get all the boxes across the city and takes it to a centralized location, and where it will be based on the claim type, it will be split, it will be segregated, and then those claims will be scanned. So you have a project called scanning. You have a product for scanning, and then you have a product for OCR. Have you heard about OCR? Optical character recognition, where based on the scanned image, all the data will be read from the application directly. You don't need to key in the data, all the data that the US citizen have filled there. So there'll be an OCR, and then you have a business rules. There will be another project, and then you have a claim whether to pay the check or not is decided by one other project. So all these projects put together, the input from the scan output from scan becomes an input to OCR. Output from OCR becomes an input to the rule engine, and output from rule engine becomes an input to the pay check project. So which is whether that will decide whether to pay the check or deny the check to the claimant, whoever it is. So all these were integrated together, and we called it as a program. So it was a very nice program that I used to work for 4 or 5 years. And the turnaround time for these, which used to take 7 to 10 business days, the turnaround time for completing the entire process is 24 hours.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's how now US healthcare, a lot of companies are able to pay the US citizens back their claims. This is the way that we are doing. Most of the biggest US healthcare organizations are part of, you must have heard about McKesson also, right? McKesson. McKesson. Yeah, McKesson. Yeah, so these were some of my clients actually. I was a program manager for that basically. So nice. It was good. Yeah, it was nice there working with them. I've been to McKesson and BCBS also in sometime 3 years ago.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the program management actually, so it gives the senior management a visibility kind of, when it talks about program. So a lot of multiple projects, they don't need to go through each and individual project. Rather, they can look from a program perspective and see what are the benefits that they are getting delivered from the program. And program manager will focus on delivery of benefits to the client, while a project manager will focus on fulfilling the requirements of the project. So that's a huge difference, right? A project manager talking about the deliverables, right? And talking about the scope and the requirements, whatever the client has given. Whereas a program manager is talking about the entire benefit. He is talking about the outcome. And what is the benefit that the program can give? Multiple projects put together, what is the benefit that the program can give is what the program manager focus will be. He'll not be focusing more on every project's output. He'll be talking about the entire program's, what is the value add that the program is going to provide to the client. So that will be the focus for the program manager. And of course, he will be focusing on interdependencies between the project. So yeah, and helps determine the best approach to manage them, see how to manage them, how to manage those interdependencies. So he will not be looking at each and every project. There could be program managers, there could be, if there are multiple projects, there could be individual project managers. So he may be managing all the project managers as well sometimes. So in my case, that's what happened. So as a program manager, I used to manage the project manager who's in WellPoint, and who's in this scanning department, who's in this rule engine department and other things, projects separately. Okay, portfolio. So program is different, portfolio is different. Portfolio could be, again, relating the projects, but the project need to be interdependent on each other. For example, I can say if I am handling all projects that are from US, I can say I am handling US portfolio. If I am handling all projects from Asia Pacific, I can say Asia Pacific portfolio. That's one way of looking at portfolio. That is, I'm getting portfolio basically refers from the revenue perspective. You must have heard from different organizations saying, this is the revenue from this kind of a portfolio. This is the bottom line or a top line that they have come up when facing. Maybe a portfolio can be even region specific. Maybe you can say, Eastern US, probably this is the revenue. In the Western US, this is the revenue. Central US, this is the revenue. So it depends on, that's one way of looking at portfolio. The other one is, for example, if I handle all projects that are from finance or healthcare, for example. So what I had is, I was a program manager for a healthcare portfolio. So which means I handle all the projects that are related to healthcare, and it is not limited to any region. So I can handle all healthcare, maybe or 2 healthcare projects from US, 2 from Australia, 2 from China, 2 from India. Maybe I'm handling 8 projects, which is my portfolio. So my healthcare portfolio is this, my finance portfolio is this. So are you able to differentiate between now the program and the portfolio? That's pretty important.
Yeah. I'm familiar.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So portfolio manager, what does he do is, he will coordinate with the portfolio management people who are all working, and the project team also, and try to see from his point will be from revenue perspective, nothing else. He will not be looking at from the delivery perspective, because the portfolio manager will have project managers internally or the program managers internally. A portfolio can have programs and projects. So there will be individual program manager or project manager who will be taking care of the deliverables, while the portfolio manager will be looking from the high level, from the cost perspective, revenue perspective, and also he will be able to manage the resources at a very high level. He can take resources from one program to another program, and then one project to another project. So that's other way that he can handle the portfolio. So this is the high level structure, how a portfolio. So you have a portfolio, you have sub portfolios, and then the portfolio can have a program and a project, and then sub portfolios again can have a program and a project, and program will have projects, and project will have other work. So this is the high level structure that can be divided. This is the way we can relate all these portfolio programs and projects. So clear with the structure?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Now, project management office. Do you have a PMO in your organization?
No, but Pfizer does.
No.
Yeah, no, ZS doesn't have any PMO.
Oh, okay. But are you aware of a PMO's roles and responsibilities, or what a PMO is?
Yeah. So they're helping, obviously lead. If you contact the PMO, they're going to help you lead from so say if like Pfizer has their own PMO office and they're looking to if they have a bunch of different work streams going on to say for one of their biosimilar portfolio, they would bring in, a project manager to help, that knows the biosimilar business and knows the ins and outs and would help, lead project initiatives and supporting and controlling everything.
Okay. So generally a portfolio PMO from a PMI perspective is something like, you have three types of PMO, like one is supportive, one is controlling, and one is directive. So supportive in the sense, that you'll have a PMO organization where you may have a group of project managers within the PMO. And, these project managers will go and support the other project managers outside the PMO office who are really delivering the projects. And these guys are very good in project management, basically. So they go and help other project managers to go and deliver. Some PMOs are controlling in the sense like the PMOs basically the PMOs are the one who will come out with all the templates, standards, procedures for any organization for managing the projects. So they start controlling the resources. They will have all the resources, even as you said, like placing the resources, and whenever the new project comes in, it goes through the PMO, and then PMO will decide whether resources are available for the project or not, and then they will start controlling to say whether we can accept the project or we can deny the project. I cannot take the project right now because we don't have enough resources to take on. Or they may have direct the organization stating that this project is very important. We may earn a lot of revenue. But what we need to do is we need to increase the resources. We need to go and hire the resources, basically. So PMO can take a call. It depends on organization to organization how they really have set up the PMO. But PMO office is one thing which creates standards, procedures, templates for managing the project management. It acts as the guidance to all the project managers. So sometimes when a new project comes in, the project manager from the PMO office will go and execute the project, and he'll come back to PMO and he'll do other activities. So that's also possible.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and stakeholder. Stakeholder is a very key thing. So what we are looking at is from the project management framework, all the key terms here, right? So stakeholder is a key people who are, who the project manager really has to manage. So who's the stakeholder? From your project, who are all the stakeholders that you can say?
Usually stakeholders are like the senior leadership, so directors, VPs, anybody who's obviously impacted or has a stake in the project or influence in the project. So
Right. Any person who has vested interest in the project is a stakeholder, or whether he or she is directly or indirectly impacted by the project is a stakeholder. For example, when Apple releases a phone, right? Is Samsung becomes a stakeholder? Is Samsung a stakeholder if Apple releases any new phone?
I guess they would be an indirect stakeholder, right? So
because the stakeholder, because the reason is they are a stakeholder. The reason is they are negatively impacted, right?
Yep.
I mean, the stakeholder's definition is whether they are impacted by in any way, directly or indirectly. So they are indirectly impacted because they are going to lose the market share.
Mm-hmm.
So from that sense, the competitors also become a stakeholder, though they are not going to influence your project, but they are going to be the stakeholder because when Apple is going to release, they are going to think about what Samsung is going to do. So obviously the competitors also become a stakeholder. So the general definition is, as I said, who has vested interest in the project, who is either directly or indirectly impacted by the outcome of the project, okay, and who is affected by the decision or any activity that is taking place in a project. So that is what a stakeholder. So stakeholders, when they should be identified. So during the start of the project, they should be identified. That is good for the project manager. The reason is, every stakeholder is going to be different. Your project team is a stakeholder. In fact, the team whom you are working, who is going to develop the application, develop the code, they are also stakeholders. And who is going to test is a stakeholder. So anybody involved in a project. The senior management is a stakeholder because they have vested interest in the project to see whether from the revenue perspective and from the customer relationship perspective, right? Yep. All the people who are involved as a stakeholder, and now the project manager has to really take care of all the stakeholders. Just think if the stakeholders list is too exhaustive, it's going to be really challenge for the project manager to go and manage all the stakeholders, because it's going to be difficult, right? I mean, every stakeholder is an individual who is going to have a different mindset altogether, whose requirement is going to be different, whose expectations are going to be different. So obviously it depends on, project manager will have to categorize. We'll be looking at that stakeholder management knowledge area in detail, but I'm just giving a heads up right now. The project manager will have to divide all these stakeholders into a matrix, saying who are all really very, very important, who are all not that important, who are all less important, So he will have to do that, and he will have to concentrate, because if, let's say, for example, if there are 100 stakeholders in a project manager cannot give equal, attention, right, to all of these people. It's very difficult. Yep. So stakeholder management is something, it's very, very, it's an art now. It's an art for the project managers to really take care of it. I mean, we use
a RACI matrix. Have you heard of that?
Exactly. That's what we are going to look at. That's what I said, I didn't want to use that word because I don't know whether you know about it or not. So I didn't use that word. The RACI matrix is the perfect thing that we'll have to use it. Responsible, accountable, consultative, and informed.
Yep.
That's the best way to, to categorize the stakeholders and know whom should you provide the information or not. Great. So you're aware of that.
Yep.
And you're using that, right? So that's great. That's great. So perfect. So that's about the stakeholders. We'll look at the stakeholder management in detail anyway. And project constraints, generally we talk about triple constraints, which is a time, cost, and scope, which is denoted in a triangle here. And then the triple constraints. And then now the PMI has added quality, risk, and then resources, human resources also as a constraint. So it could be even stakeholder also. So we need to manage all these constraints. So we, in the sense, the project manager has to really manage all the constraints. So why do we call these as constraints? Because if one gets affected, the other gets affected by default. For example, if I'm going to say my schedule is impacted, my project schedule is going to get delayed, obviously my cost is going to also increase, right?
Yep.
So if one gets affected, if one changes, the other automatically changes. So for example, if my scope is going to get increased, both my time and cost is going to get increased.
Yep.
Right. So it depends on how. So if a manager says, okay, no problem, let me go ahead and extend my schedule for 10 days. So he cannot just take a call, because obviously the cost is going to increase and he's answerable to the management. So he need to manage all these constraints. Okay, I'm taking care of time, cost, and scope, but I'm going to compromise on quality. So that's also not acceptable, right? So he will have to manage the quality also. So talking about all these things, you have to talk about everything, like communication. So I cannot compromise on communication because that's a key thing. I cannot compromise on stakeholders because they are very, very important. So they are the people who are going to influence the project, positive or negative, whatever it is. So then I cannot compromise on risks, basically, because if I don't take care of risk, I'm just concentrating only on whatever is going on in the project schedule, then obviously it's going to blast somewhere else. So risk is one thing. So project manager is the poorest guy in the world, right? Taking care of everything. He has to manage everything, really. So that's the constraints all about. So project constraints, we'll be talking more later. And then now we are going to talk about relationship between project management, operations management, and organization strategy. So project management, operations, we saw that it's going to be ongoing and repetitive. So obviously ongoing operations are going to be out of scope of the project, outside the scope, right? It's not going to be part of the project, scope.
Right.
And operations management is the area of management concerned with the ongoing production of goods and services. That is, it ensures that it's a BAU basically, ensures business operations continue effectively, efficiently, and concerned with managing processes that transform input into output. So obviously, there are activities that take place which you have inputs, there are some processes that take place, and it's going to be output, and that's a cycle. It's like production units. Basically, you have assembly of any goods or services, right? Any goods, any products. So what you do, you have all the raw materials, you have an automated machines, and you keep on assembling. So you have the raw materials as input, the process is nothing but the assembly, and the output is the final product. So it's an ongoing process, it's repetitive. There's not going to be much change in the process, right? It's the same process that's going to continue for every day. There's going to be production of hundreds and hundreds of units of the same product. So that's why it's called operations management. Okay, so from exam point of view, that's one tip that we have mentioned here, is when we are talking about a large project, right? Generally when we talk about project, just think about a large project, very large project, which will have multiple constraints, which will have minimum 200 people, and then which will have a budget of over 10 million. Okay. So, because sometimes what happens is when some questions are there, right? The key thing that we need to do from an exam perspective is you have to unlearn whatever you are doing right now. And then you learn whatever only the PMI talks about. Gotcha. Because sometimes it will be very difficult when you are learning something. You see, automatically our mind tries to, relate it to what we are doing on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes what happens is we don't really do what PMI is stating. It's something different, basically. So there will be a clash, and when you take up the exam, right? So if you're going to answer from your perspective, your experience perspective, and not from PMI's perspective, and then obviously your answer is going to be wrong. So that's the reason I tell people, please unlearn whatever you're doing right now, and learn only the PMI. It is as if that you don't know what is project management, and you are learning project management now. So from exam perspective, that's the way we have to look at it. Okay, so some additional terminologies. So time is, we are just past 1.5 hours. So maybe another 20 minutes, maybe we'll take a break, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So objective. So what is an objective? Objective is nothing but an end result, right? What is the strategic result that anybody wants to achieve as an objective? So it's a result that needs to be obtained, a product that needs to be produced, and a service that needs to be performed. And objective must be very clear and achievable. Because when we talk about project objective, it should be very, very clear. We need to know what exactly we are going to deliver. And what is a deliverable? Deliverable is something, a unit that we are going to produce it to the client, or something that we are going to produce out of the project is a deliverable. It could be either to a project or a process or a phase. It could be multiple phases, right? A project can have multiple phases, and a phase can have multiple process also. So from every process, you may have a deliverable. For example, let's say requirements. You take your requirements. What is the deliverable you have from requirements perspective? You have a BRD, right? Business requirement document, or a software specification document, software requirement document. Yeah. Some people call as SRS, some people call as BRD, some people call it FS, which is functional specification. It depends on, organizations, again, how they call it as. So everything has its own deliverable. Every single phase has a deliverable. For example, a design phase has a deliverable of architecture of the project. A development phase has nothing but the end product. A testing phase is nothing but test result. So everything has its own deliverables. So an assumption is one other key thing that we need to really take. So when we are doing a project, there's no project without any assumptions. When you are initiating a project, there's a lot of assumptions that get into during the initial state of the project. But as and when the project progresses, obviously there are some of the assumptions are really removed, or some becomes reality, some becomes redundant, some becomes, untrue, whatever it is. So assumptions are a very key thing. And lessons learned is another key terminology that we know. I mean, I believe you must be using lessons learned in your organizations.
Yeah, we just had a huge meeting in New York to go over lessons learned for Pfizer's biosimilar that just launched last year. So it was like all day lessons learned, best practices to take forward.
Yeah, that's pretty key. Best practices and lessons learned, which has to be really documented. Basically, a lot of project managers and the team members, they ignore these lessons learned. Basically, I mean, they try to, they know what is happening, but they do not diligently go ahead and document it. But documentation is very, very important from the organization perspective, because later on, even after a year, when a similar project comes into picture, the project manager has to go and refer the previous projects and see what are the lessons learned, what are the best practices they have followed, so that the similar mistakes are not can be avoided. Right, same mistakes need not be repeated again. That's very, very key.
Yeah.
So lessons.
I was just saying. Yeah, I created that document, and it's kind of like a living document right now that we're just kind of keeping track of and adding to for this year's project implementations.
Wow, that's great. That's great. It's a living document. Some people, what they do is they do it only at the end of the project. Some people, like I think, since you are doing as and when something happens, right? As in, it's a living document. So as and when certain things are learned, then immediately go ahead and document. So that might be useful even for the same project in a future time.
Yep.
So it will be helpful. And the other important term is progressive elaboration. Progressive elaboration is, as and when you progress, you keep elaborating. In a sense, at the start of the project, sometimes you may not have entire requirements in your hand, but as and when you start, doing the project, it gets progress, it gets elaborated. So maybe from the estimation perspective also, during the start of the project, you have L0 estimate, which is a very, very high level. A ballpark estimate is given. And then when you start detailing the project plan, and then sometimes when you start executing, you get to know L1 estimates and L2 estimates comes into picture, right? So that is what we call as progressive elaboration. That is, the level of detail it gets as and when the project becomes more iterative. As and when the process is more iterative. This is more applicable in agile projects, basically. Agile projects more applicable when you start doing it, rather than in waterfall.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And so talking about the feasibility study, that's one other thing. So you have feasibility study is something try to see whether undertaking a project is feasible or not. So you have a business case, you come out with the business case. Business case really is the input for any projects, basically. So because without a business case, there is not going to be any project. So business case is important. Based on the business case and what is the concept, you try to do a research and see whether this project can be handled or not, whether it's feasible enough or not to handle this project. And then once you refine it and come out with the definitive plan of action, then you start defining the scope and come out with the final project plan. So this is one other area, key term that we'll have to remember. So these are some of the terms: objective, deliverable, assumptions, lessons learned, and progressive elaboration, feasibility study. Then we will discuss some questions also after this lesson is over. We'll talk about how exams, sample questions, some 4 or 5 sample questions. We'll see about that.
The organizational influences and about the project life cycle. So this part of the project management framework. So how is the organizational is going to influence the project manager? The organization culture, the style, the systems that are in place in the organization can impact the way the project is executed and managed. So do you agree? Do you really see any organizational influence in running your projects?
Yeah, just in terms of like how the culture is and how it's set up, it definitely adds a dynamic to every project that you work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll be seeing throughout in our PMI, I mean, all the knowledge areas and other things, how organizational influences the project manager. That's going to be, we talk about organization process assets and enterprise environmental factors. These are the two things that we're seeing very frequently. Okay. So what is the organizational culture, styles, and communication? So cultural norms of an organization develop over time and will impact the way the project is managed. That's what, as per the PMI. Cultural norms of an organization develop over time because when you join an organization, obviously you do not know about the culture. So you try to understand the culture of an organization over time and the way, and also try to understand how it is going to impact the project. So organizational culture and style, made up of shared values and norms, shared beliefs and expectations, and motivation reward systems, work ethics. Because when we talk about organization culture, these are some of the things, right? How people behave, how the systems are in place, how the motivation and rewards are going to, how the organization looks at the key resources, basically, whether they are trying to encourage the resources, how are they providing a good environment to work, are there best policies, procedures, and standards that they are following, So these are all certain things regarding the behavior of the, how you work hours also, right? I mean, are the organization very strict about 8 hours work, or are they kind of flexible enough to say, you can work for 6 hours? I mean, 8 hours. I mean, even if you can work for 6 hours, as long as you are done with the, activity that's been assigned to you, we are okay. So all these things come into picture as an organization culture. So for a project manager to successfully manage a project, he has to understand the organizational structure and culture. He understand what is the culture and what is the norms, what are the work ethics. Because if I am going to be a new project manager in an organization, I just recently joined an organization, then I mean, based on my previous experience or past experience or past organization, I cannot go and start, managing the project in the same way. So for me to manage the project, I need to take some time initially to understand what this organization is all about, what is its culture, what are the people, how people are really motivated here, and then I'll be able to successfully manage the project. So it's not a standard. It's not something a project management is very standard across organizations. So obviously, the way you manage the project is, I mean, the framework is going to be the same, but the way you're going to manage all depends on the influences, certain influences of these factors like organization culture, style, and how you communicate, and all those things are really going to, help, or it's going to influence the way you're going to manage the project.
Mm-hmm.
So organization culture is an enterprise environmental factor, EEF. That's what you must have heard in your videos, right? In your prior project cost management or time management.
I think so, yeah. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, so enterprise environmental factors is how the environment, there could be an internal environment as well as external environment that could really influence the way the project is running. So organization culture is one of the internal environmental factors, because this is an environment, right? It's outside the project boundary, but within an organization. So obviously, whatever is within the organization is going to really hit the way the project is going to be run. So that's the key here. And from organization perspective, you have 3 types of organization structures, basically. One is functional, one is matrix, and one is projectized. So projectized is nothing but, all the resources who are going to work on a project works under the project manager, and project manager has complete control over the resources. Then that is called projectized environment. So let's say I have 15 to 20 resources working on a project, and when I move on to a new project, I take the same 20 people again with me. So I completely have control over all these resources, and it is purely, all the resources report to the project manager. That's a projectized organization. Functional organization is something like, you have a center of excellence kind of thing. You have a specialized department. For example, you have a specialized organization, unit, business unit, where you have all big data analysts are there. And then one department may have Hadoop analysts, for example. I'm not sure whether I'm talking the right technology here, but one could have the right, business objects like crystal reports or any other reporting structure. Reporting what is the tools basically. So what happens when if I am a project manager? So what these resources basically will do is, they will be working for that function. So they'll be working for that function, and they are all kind of SMEs. They have a really skilled, they are all skilled resources who has exceptional knowledge over the tools and technologies that they are working on. Right? That's functional. So matrix organization is a combination of these two, functional and projectized. In the sense, for a matrix organization, there will be a project manager, but the resources will be, from the functional organization. So if you are running a project, and then if you need a big data analyst, one Hadoop analyst, and one reporting tool analyst, right? So you will be going to 3 different functions and asking for resources. So the functional manager, what he will do is he will assign you the resources, say this resource will be available from this date to this date. But when those resources have, they are purely working only for the project, and they are really reporting to the project manager, or they are really in control of the project manager, then it is called as a strong matrix. Strong matrix in the sense, resources from the functional, but they are working in a project, and project manager has control over the resources. So if the resources reporting both to the functional manager and the project manager, then it's called a balanced matrix.
Yeah, so it's like the seesaw or whatever. Imagine like a seesaw between the project manager and the functional manager.
Yeah, it happens, right? Most of the organization, there will be a clash between the functional and the project manager. For project manager always want the resources full time, whereas function manager, though he provides the resources, he says that, in my function, there are activities that my resource has to do. So he can work on the project for maybe 6 hours, or 2 hours, he has to work on my function. So always there's a kind of a conversation or a clash that's happening between the functional and the project manager, especially in the weak organization, weak matrix. Especially in the weak matrix, where the resource will be working on a project, but that resource will not be in control of the project manager, and the resource will be reporting only to the functional manager. And even if he is going to take off, he will not inform the project manager. He will just tell the functional manager and go on leave. But this project manager, poor guy, wouldn't have any clue on whether that guy resource will come or not, or whether he's going to take off or not. So he couldn't even plan. So weak matrix, a project manager it's very difficult for a project manager to run the project. Whereas a strong matrix is the best way. Strong matrix is almost equal to the projectized environment. The only difference is the resources are from the functional organization.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah. And so many organizations, they don't really follow one type. They follow all the composite, whether they will have both projectized and matrix organizations. So when they are having multiple combinations of this, then you call it as composite organization.
Gotcha.
So enterprise environmental factors, this is one again from the PMI definition, PMBOK. An enterprise environmental factor which can affect the availability of resources and influence the way projects are conducted. So based on the organization structure, I mean, your enterprise environmental factors, because it is the how the resources are going to be, what do you say? Resources are going to be assigned to a project or whether they are going to be allocated to a project. It depends on the organization structure, basically. Whether it's going to be a projectized or matrix or functional or composite, right? So that's how the EEF is also going to come into picture. Like how we saw organizational culture is one of the enterprise environmental factors. Organization structure is also another EEF that can really influence the project manager. Over running the project. So, what is the relationship between the organizational structure and the project manager? I mean, do you see any relationship?
So, what is the relationship between the organizational structure and the project manager? So I would say the relationship is obviously they have to interact and work with whatever the organizational structure is.
Right. See, it all depends on what kind of organizational structure or what kind of organization hierarchy they have, whether it's going to be functional or a matrix or a projectized or a composite. So obviously the organization structure is going to influence the way the project manager is going to look at the project. Because if it is not functional, then we have to look at from, if it's a matrix organization, then we have to look at from whether it's a weak or a balanced or a strong matrix. If it is a projectized, then he will have full control of the resources. So the organization structure is going to play an important role in the project management.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the one visualization of how the functional organization works. So functional organization here, there is no project manager authority because there is no existence of a project manager. Here it's only the functional manager who is available. And the resource availability, for example, the functional team all report to the functional managers, and functional managers will be working on the project budget, basically. Functional manager will work on the project's budget. And here the project manager role is very, very part-time. There is no project manager role here, unless or otherwise anybody within the functional team takes a role of a project manager. So it's going to be only part-time because here the functional manager is the one who will be working full-time. And team members usually work part-time. The reason is because they may go outside to work on a projects. Because if you have heard about the center of excellence, right? There could be a big data center of excellence or reporting a specific crystal report center of excellence. So what happens in those center of excellences? They try to build more internal tools, or they try to enhance their skill set. Basically, the COE is the manager or the functional manager. Actually, the COE is nothing but the functional manager there, who helps the team to improve their skill sets, who helps the team and work on the rewards and recognitions, and who helps other project managers to loan the resources for the project need. Because these guys are not running projects. They are only handling the functions. But how can the resources in the functional organization can be used is basically when these resources go outside the function and work for a project, that's where their skill sets are used. So the resources, the team members within the functional manager is going to be usually a part-time. They are not going to work full-time here because most of the time they are going to be working on different projects. So this is a weak matrix. If you see, you have a chief executive, PM authority is very low here. Resource availability is low. Who manages project budget? Here again, functional manager is managing the project budget. PM role is part-time, PM admin staff is part-time, team members part-time again. So if you look, so the functional manager takes the onus, he takes control. Even though the project manager is there, the functional managers take control, and authority of the project manager is very less. That's why it's called a weak matrix. So in the balanced matrix, the project manager's role is low to moderate. His authority is low to moderate. So he has some, so 50-50 kind of thing, 50% the functional manager and 50% the project manager. And in the strong matrix, the project manager's authority is moderate to high. So the function manager loads the resources, whereas the manager, project managers, I mean, you have project managers who kind of have control over the resources. The PM role is full-time here. Team member role is full-time or sometimes part-time. It depends, because the team member may work 50% of the time in the project, 50% of the time in the function, the respective function itself. So, but still the project manager will have control over the resources. So that's why it's termed as a strong matrix.
Gotcha.
Okay. So here you see there's a tip that is mentioned in the cloud. For the exam, assume the organization has a matrix structure unless otherwise noted. So explicitly, if it is not stated that this is the organization, right? You should assume that question to be a matrix organization.
Gotcha.
In your question. So that's one tip that you need to, probably you can make a note of it. And so strong matrix and a projectized organization are relatively kind of same. I mean, they have many of the characteristics of the projectized organization, strong matrix, because there the project manager has complete control, right? So that's the reason, most of the characteristics of the strong matrix is something related to projectized environment. And this is the projectized. Projectized is complete control of no functional manager gets into picture here, if you see. It's only the project manager and the staff. There's no functional manager concept. So that's purely projectized environment. So there's no separate big data team or a reporting tool team or any other team, Hadoop team. It's everything, all these members belong to the project manager. They could belong to different project managers. So it's purely projectized organization. No function.
Do Agile methodology, does this use the projectized structure?
Okay, a good question. Agile is again, I would say, a matrix, because when you talk about Agile, you need to have a team of people who are
functional, right?
having, so there will be people from multiple functional units.
Yeah.
Maybe we can tell them as a strong matrix organization, because there is no project manager in the Agile. We have something called Agile coach or a Scrum master who will be running the projects. So, yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. So, and this is composite, where you have function managers as well as project managers. So, again, it's kind of having multiple combinations of this in the same organization. I mean, composite will be even more crazy, in fact, in some organizations when they implement this. You'll have a projectized, you'll have a functional, you'll have a matrix. Sometimes put together, you may have in the same structure, you may have both projectized as well as a matrix, or you may have a functional and a matrix both together. So that's the composite. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of a projectized organization? I mean, these three types of organization. See, in a functional organization, as I said, the resources will have a career path, because they will have an option to improve their skill sets, and they can concentrate more on their specialization, right? And they can improve their development of skills. And workforce is flexible, one manager, no confusion, because it's only the functional manager. But the disadvantage is working at the departmental level is prioritized over project work. So what happens is, when you're working in the functional, when that resource obviously has to go and work on a project, right? So when he's working for a project, but the priority is given to the department, that is the function, rather than on the project. So the guy gets confused where to put his activity, all his strengths, whether he has put time, whether to in the functional or whether he has to really follow the instructions of the project manager, or should he really follow the instruction of the functional manager. So that's a problem. Okay, and there is no career path in project management. Obviously, he wouldn't have any career path in project management, whereas in a project-based organization, you start off as a developer, then become a lead, and then maybe you can become a project manager over a period of time. Whereas in a functional organization, you wouldn't have that option at all, because you are working on a specific skill set, and then you will be just enhancing that skill set. That's it. You don't get an opportunity to become a project manager, or you don't have a career path in project management at all. So that's the disadvantage of functional. And projectized. The advantage is communication within project is better, because people are all together. There is no confusion between functional or project. So everybody is working on a project. So communication is better, and loyalty to project goals is greater, because unlike functional, right, here there's no guy working for functional. So let's say all 100% of his time is going to work only on project, and obviously the loyalty towards the project goals or the objectives is going to be much better than the functional one. So what is disadvantage of projectized is less efficient use of resources, because here if a resource is having only, let's say, 6 hours of work on a day, that's all. He may not be used for the remaining 2 hours in a projectized environment. The reason is he cannot be used anywhere else. Whereas in a functional, right, if he is from a functional, then 6 hours of project, 2 hours, he may still go and work in a functional organization. But here, since there's no concept of functional organization, so less efficient use of resources there generally happens. Your resource, what do you say, the productivity or something may be a little less here, or utilization of resources. Utilization of resources from the project manager will be very, very less here. It's not 100% utilization. Sometimes it will be ranging between 80 to 90% working. So 10% of the time they are idle, or they are pretty much idle. Okay, so so when the project is complete, there is a possibility that there are no other projects for the team members to work on. So that's another disadvantage, right? So they are insecure basically. So as long as the project is there, they have work to do. If there is no project, right, they will just get into a resource pool. That's it, buffer pool or resource pool, whatever you call, and then they will have no work. Some people call them as bench. I don't know whether you have a concept of bench, but you call it as a idle resource pool. Basically, they'll be just sitting idle.
Yep.
So that's the disadvantage, right? Because at least in the functional organization, right, a guy comes to a project, when a project is over, he goes back to the function, he has some work to do. So from his career path, he doesn't have any problem. In a project-based organization, let's say for another couple of months, he's not getting any project. So what does the organization do? Obviously, they will try to see whether this resource is needed or not, and they will try to lay him off, right? So that's very much possible. So that's the other disadvantage of projectized organization. And obviously limited and diffuse skill development. The reason is the same resource may be used for sometimes in order to utilize the resource, right? Say for example, I'm a developer in .NET, and I have only 4 hours or 5 hours of work that I have. The remaining 3 hours, I may be asked to go and do a testing also. It's possible. You go and do the testing. So what happens here is I will be unable to improve my skill set, unlike a functional where you have a lot of ample time to go and improve your skill set, enhance your skill set. Here in a projectized organization, you cannot do that. So that's another disadvantage. Coming to matrix organization, the advantage is better coordination, because you have resources from SMEs, subject matter experts from different functions. So you have a better coordination of all these resources to execute the project. Resource utilization is maximized because you are getting all the skilled resources from multiple functions. So, but problem is, disadvantage is greater communication complexity, because it's a overhead. The communication, if you talk to the resource from a project manager point of view, if you tell the resource something, then you have to inform the functional manager also that this is what is being told. So the overhead of communication from a project manager point of view or from the resource point of view, it's going to be complex, because 2 people will always be involved. Even if a resource is going to take off, for example, or resource has some problems with this activities, you will have to inform both the functional manager as well as the project manager. So he has a dual reporting here, right? So that's the problem with the matrix organization. and higher potential for conflict. Obviously, when you are involved, multiple people from multiple functions are coming into picture. Obviously, everybody has their own ego and status, so obviously there is going to be a potential for conflict.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah. So we have something called organizational process assets. This also you must have gone through in your videos. EEF, like enterprise environmental factors. So you have standards, policies, procedures, and knowledge base. All your standards, all your templates, all the processes that you're going to follow, all the lessons learned that you are going to maintain. These are all called as organizational process assets. So whenever a new project comes in or whenever there is a challenge in a project, the project manager should always look into organizational process assets and see whether there are any standardized way of, taking care of this challenge, or is there any lessons learned that is already there? Somebody has faced a similar kind of situation and how was that handled? So he will have to go and refer to the OPAs. So these are the four that constitutes the OPA.
Okay.
So enterprise environmental factors, these are all the items that include in EEF. That is organizational. We talked about the organizational structure, organizational culture, organizational influence, right? So these are all the things. Political, sometimes the political scenario of the country also may play an important role in the way your project is running. Say, for example, if you are taking a healthcare project and, let's say a new president has come into rule. Now you have a new president in your country.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he's going to take some stand over the healthcare, right? Obviously, indirectly, your projects are going to get influenced over that. So these are all the external factors. Organizational is internal factor, political is external factor, regulations, again, from the government perspective, that's an external factor. Yeah, economic situation, that's again an external factor. You don't have a control over the economic. Competition, again, an external factor. Market condition, industry standards, all these are external factors which are going to involve. So these are some of the things that may indirectly influence the way you run the project. So these are all the things that you will have to look for as part of your EEFs, enterprise environmental factors. Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's all we have from the organizational structure, influence, OPAs, EEF. Now let's look at the project lifecycle. So, okay, project lifecycle and project management process both are different. Okay, so let's try to understand the project management process group. Project management process group, we have that 5 process group, right? Initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling closing. This is 5. Yeah. So this is common across all the industries. Even if you take an IT industry, if you take an automobile industry, manufacturing industry, construction industry, the process groups are same. Okay, but project life cycle is going to be different across industries. For example, in IT industry, the project life cycle, let's say, it's going to be like, it's going to start from requirements, then design, then development, then testing, then UAT, and then finally implementation. So if you take a construction industry, it's something different, right? There is no requirement, there is no design or something else, right? The construction industry, you have something called procurement of the site, and then probably building a plan, kind of coming out with the layout plan, and then building the site, and then there's no testing or something that is involved. So the process of project life cycle of a construction industry is different. Automobile industry, again, if you take it, you have a raw materials, you have assembly, you have output that's coming out. So life cycle is different, right? So that's a product life cycle basically. We need to understand the difference between project life cycle and project management process group. A lot of people get confused between these two. So that's the reason I'm trying to explain here. Like project life cycle is unique. It's not unique across industries, whereas project management process groups are unique across industries.
Gotcha.
So project lifecycle characteristics, no best way to define the project lifecycle. So we cannot say that, every industry has its own way of defining the project lifecycle. Often defined by the organization or industry standards, it depends again. Like IT industry standard, you may say this is what the requirement. I mean, even within that, if you talk about waterfall or iterative methodologies, then again that life cycle could change. Depends on what kind of methodology you are following. And transition from one phase to another generally involves a technical transfer or handoff. That's in the project life cycle. And phases can start before prior phase deliverables are approved, or fast tracking or transition. For example, see in a construction, right? You can, there could be multiple phases while doing a constructing a building. First, you lay the basement, right? And then you raise the pillars, and then you construct the first floor, second floor, third floor, etc. And then you may have to do a painting, and then you have to do plastering or painting, or maybe you need to lay woods, whatever it is. So phases can start before prior phase deliverables are approved, even before the prior phase deliverables are approved, in the sense, even if the customer accepts it, before accepting, you can start the second phase, which means that you can run multiple phases in parallel. So either we talk about fast tracking or crashing, we'll talk about that in time management later. So yeah, you must have heard about that, right? In time management.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those.
Yeah. Okay. So a project life cycle, all projects have a life cycle. So every single project will have a life cycle. Depending on the size of the project, the life cycle could be, in an iterative manner. It could be, there could be multiple cycles that may happen. If it is a short project, there could be only one cycle. Or it could be, if it is a long project, maybe 1 year or 2 year project, even a single project life cycle, right? There will be multiple cycles within the same life cycle. Okay. So for example, let's say it's a 2 year project and there are 5 different phases in a project. Then obviously you will have 5 different life cycles within the project, right? The same project life cycle will happen 5 times over there. So phases are well defined, and usually to move on to another phase, there is a transfer of deliverables, because from one phase to another, obviously there's going to be deliverables that's going to be handed over to the other phase. So, so that's the project life cycle. Each life cycle is made up of project phases. So every single life cycle, we call it as a project phase. So in a single project, as I said, if there are 5 phases, then you will have 5 life cycles that will be happening. Because it's a cycle, it's right from requirements to implementation. You will have 5 different phases. For each phase, you will have a requirements through implementation, one life cycle. Okay?
Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
And then, so this is how the project typical cost and staffing level across generic project lifecycle structure. So, when you start the project, obviously the cost is going to be a little less. And as and when the project charter is prepared, the cost is going to go up and staffing level is also going to go up. And once the project management plan is defined, obviously it's going to go out. And until once the deliverables are accepted, right? If you see that curve coming down after the accepted deliverables, that is, because you're going to ramp down the people, right? You don't need to have all the resources. So obviously the customer is going to, sign off on the UAT, and then he wants to go live. What happens? You will start ramping down the resources during UAT. Like in development, you have 50 resources. In UAT, you don't need to have 50 resources because you're just going to address only the issues, right? So you may need to have only 10 resources supporting UAT cycle. And then once the UAT is signed off, obviously for implementation, you don't need to have all the 10. So you will start ramping down again. And then finally, when the project is closed, you will have the complete cost also coming down, if you see that. So this is the life cycle, if this is structure, how a cost and staffing level goes up and down during this life cycle of the project. Okay.
Makes sense.
Any questions? you have any questions, please?
No, makes sense.
Okay. So this is another one. Again from the cost staffing level. If you look at from the uncertainty and risk point of view, obviously the risk goes up as and when the project is initial stages of the project is going up, and then obviously as the project manager starts managing the project and starts handling the risk, it goes down. So let me see if I can annotate here. Yeah, so this curve, right? This curve comes down. If you see the risk goes up, this curve just goes up, and as and when the project progresses, but it doesn't go up, keep on going up like this for the cost and staffing. The risk will be managed. It's very high during the start of the project, but as and when the project goes, the risk also comes down. So that's the other one. Okay, or let me remove the annotate and put this here. Okay. So this is the other one. From the stakeholder influence point of view, the stakeholders are going to influence you at a very high during the start of the project, right? Because every stakeholder, you identify the stakeholders, and they are going to come up with a lot of requirements, and each and every individual stakeholder is going to have a lot of expectations. So they are going to influence you during the start of the project, and then it's going to come down. So that's the dark blue line that goes down, and then obviously the cost is going to go up, as we saw earlier. The dotted line represents cost is going to go up as and when the the project goes, because the more the more you start executing the project, obviously the more the failures or more the errors that are going to come up, right? Cost. So that's going to cost us more. So we have something like 4 types of life cycles. One is sequential versus overlapping life phases. The other one is predictive life cycle. The other one is iterative and incremental. The other one is adaptive. So adaptive is the one that we call it as agile methodology, where we talk about Scrum and Agile. Have you heard about Scrum?
I've heard the term before, but I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, okay. So Scrum is one of the Agile methodology, one of the Agile frameworks. See, Agile, when we talk about, right, Agile is a methodology where there's nothing called like waterfall. You don't have a methodology called Agile. So Agile is a methodology, or you can call it as a framework. So you have Scrum, you have XP, Extreme Programming, you have Lean, you have Kanban, then Prince 2. So there are a lot of other methodologies that come within, not Prince 2, sorry, Prince 2 is not Agile. So Lean, Kanban, you must have heard about all these other things. So these are all, Lean. Right. So these are all some of the methodologies that we follow. So Agile is kind of a life cycle. The way you run the project is very, very fast. Your output is very fast in Agile. It's very dynamic because the customer requirements are very dynamic here in Agile. Customer can come out with a lot of requirements, a lot of changes very frequently, depending on the customer work culture or the market the customer is working upon. So so where you don't have a clarity over the scope, or where you really know that the customer is going to, during the course of the project, where the customer is really going to come and come back with a lot of change requests, very frequent change requests during the execution of the project itself, then I think the best way to go about is Agile, adaptive method, because adaptive is you adapt to changes. That's the reason it's called adaptive, basically. Yep. And iterative and incremental is again very similar to Agile, but here, you go through a series of repeated cycles. Say, unlike waterfall, right? Waterfall, what we do, we go to the requirements. Once the requirement is done, it's a sequential, the first one. So once we're done with the requirements, then you go with the design. Then once you go complete the design, you go with the development. So you don't go back to requirements at any point or design at any point. unless or otherwise you see some issues coming out, right? Only during testing you will get to know about the issues, not even during development. Only during testing, when you do a root cause analysis, RCA, right? Only then you will get to know about whether this particular issue is due to your requirements or due to design or due to development issue, coding issue. So, so sequential is a sequential phase, whereas predictive is fully plan driven. That is completely, you know what is going to happen. It's completely plan driven, whereas iterative and incremental is kind of what is iterative and incremental? For example, you have a requirement and then you do a design, you do development. Again, you get back to the next requirement, do design development. Then you go back to the next requirement. So what happens is it's a cycle. It's an iterative method. So you are not completing all the requirements at one shot, unlike waterfall. Here you take one requirement at a particular time at a periodic interval, and then you try to do the execution completely, come back to the next requirement. Then if you kind of do that, you'll be able to showcase something to the customer, right? You will have some output at any point in time. Waterfall, you will have the output only at the end of the project. Whereas in iterative and incremental or adaptive, you will have outputs or deliverables at very frequent intervals. Okay, so these are the 4 life cycle stages. Then we have this project life cycle, the project phases. So project phases are nothing but divisions within the project, like how we talk about, the requirements phase or a design phase or a coding phase. So these are some of the divisions within the project, and segmented to subsets for ease of management, planning, and control. Because if you have different phases or different during the life cycle, it will be easy for us to manage and control rather than everything going on in parallel, right? If let's say, requirements is going in requirements, design, development, testing, everything is going in parallel, then it will be hard for the project manager to really plan and control over what's happening. So that's the reason it is divided into phases, basically, so that you have a proper control over what is for ease of management, basically. That's it. So includes work with a distinct focus that differs from other phases. So you know that requirements, okay, we are talking only about requirements. Design, we talk about only about design. So you can distinguish between what each phase has to deliver. Phases often involve different organizations or skills, obviously, right? So for requirements, one phase, you may need to have an SMEs working on that. The other phase, the design phase, you need to have a technical architects working on that. Then during the development phase, you need a skilled resources who are particular technology need to be working on that. Then testing, you need to have a pure testers. So every different phase will have its own organizations or skills, will involve different organizational skills. And again, the project phases can have either it could be sequential, overlapping, or iterative, like what we saw in the previous slide. Okay, so this is about the project phases, and some of the phases is, some of the characteristics of project phases is, every project phase can be considered as a project also. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Because it would have its own start and end time, right?
Yeah.
So it will have a start, beginning.
You're going through the cycle again.
Right, and it will have its own outcome deliverables. So every phase can be a project. So that's one thing. And a project phase can be closed without the decision to initiate any other phases. So, for example, you can close a phase without even considering any other phases. So, okay, so you can call the project phases, or project phase end could be your what do you call your milestones or sign-offs, or you can talk about phase gate review. You talk about phase gate reviews, right? Phase gate review is kind of, that's a gate for you. So once that is approved, then you go to the next activity. So that's why we call them as phase exits or milestones or phase gates, decision gates, stage gates or kill points, whatever it is. Because kill points is the reason we say is we can terminate that at that point in time. So that's the reason we call it as kill points. So phases can overlap when compressing a schedule, obviously, right? When compressing a schedule is you are trying to overlap a lot of phases together at the same time. You are going to run the multiple activities parallelly. So which means you are going to compress the schedule so that you save time, but it's going to add more risk. When two activities are sequentially planned and due to compression of schedule, when you're going to run them in parallel, obviously the risk is going to be high, right?
Yep.
So that's the another characteristics of the phase. So these are all some of the items from the project phases perspective. And then here, product life cycle. Okay, so that's another key thing that we need to distinguish between a product life cycle and a project life cycle. See, product life cycle, when does it start? It starts right from the business plan. Because if I'm going to develop a product, so for me to develop a product, I would have done some market study and then come out with a business plan, right? So my life cycle starts from there, and then my initiation planning and other things goes on, and then finally closing of the project happens, but that doesn't end there. So what happens? It goes live, it goes to operations, right? And then it has to retire at some point. Either it has to retire at some point or it becomes extinct at some point in time. So until then, the product life cycle. So the product life cycle is a project life cycle is a subset of a product life cycle. A project life cycle is a subset of product life cycle, whereas the product life cycle goes beyond the project life cycle and it gets into operations and until it gets retired or until the market disowns a product. Sorry.
Yep.
You're clear, right? So the product life cycle.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So the product versus project is this. So this is what we discussed. So here the product development and the project life cycle is same. If you look at it, so this is the product development and you have the project life cycle. So these two are same. So project life cycle starts about initiate, plan, execute, and close. Of course, monitor and control and close. This is the project life cycle. So this is the product development also.
Yeah.
But here, if you see the product conceptualization, market study, and then operations and end of life is also part of the product life cycle.
Yep.
So project life cycle is a subset of the entire product life cycle.
Yep. Makes sense.
Right. So that's it. And then project life cycle versus product life cycle is a product can require or span many projects over its life, right? Because project is a subset of the product. It can have multiple projects over its life. Example, a project during the product conception phase could be determined based on customer's need, and a project during product maturity phase could be perform a competitive analysis. Do you understand this point? A project during the product conception, right? A product conception is nothing but a project.
Yeah.
Nothing but the project depending on the customer's need. And the project during the product maturity phase could be perform competitive analysis. Performing a competitive analysis is a project again within the product.
Yep.
So that's why we say product can require or span many projects over its life.
Yep.
It could have multiple projects. So project has its own life cycle. So obviously, since it's a subset, it has its own life cycle. So every project in a product has a product can have, in a simpler way, product can have multiple project life cycles, to put it simple.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay. So I think this is the entire project management framework. So we saw what is a PMBOK, what is a project management, program management, portfolio management, PMO we saw, stakeholders, project constraints, project life cycle, product life cycle, and the organizational structures, organizational culture. We spoke about the OPA and EEF, what are the things that are involved, right? So these are all some of the things that are part of the project management framework. So these are the key things that we need to remember. I mean, there's not going to be any question directly on this, but these are the key things which we need to understand so that when we move forward, we'll be able to relate to what we are talking about.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right. Have a great day today. We'll meet tomorrow morning. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.